If you put a gun to my head and you said you could only do one thing for the rest of your life, it would be writing novels. I feel like that's my passion and my calling. But it's really fun to be able to write comics and to do animated TV shows and all the rest. It's much easier than writing a novel, I think also because you're collaborating with someone. Growing up in South Africa, under apartheid was very distressing, and it was a terrible time. It was a terrible racist regime. And I'm very aware of the terrible things that happened during that time, but also how that affects where we are now. Even today, 20 years after democracy, it's a poisonous tree that's been cut down, but the roots are still there, and we will still be tripping over them for decades to come. So I do feel the burden of the past, and I do feel the burden as a white South African, because obviously I've had a lot of privileges and advantages that black South Africans my age won't have had. So I go into everything I do very aware of that. But I think that's why in my work I attack the idea of how we are haunted by our past, and how you live with your dark past. How do you live with this burden of things that you've done personally, or a legacy that's been left behind that you don't necessarily identify with, but that you have to deal with on a daily basis. I don't think it affects my writing, except in that obviously I have this, very strong sense of social justice. But I don't feel that it holds me back in any way. I have a studio that I rent, which I share with 5 illustrators and designers, and it's very important for me to get out of my house, because writing is so lonely. You're stuck in your head with imaginary people, and you go a bit out of your mind. It's important to have other people around, so to keep you grounded and to keep you sane, and so you can remember how to have a conversation with actual human beings. I was 5 years old when I knew that I wanted to be a writer. I probably wrote some stories then. I found out that you could get paid to make stuff up, and I was like, are you kidding me? That's amazing, I'm doing that. So I wanted to be a writer since I was 5. I think the first story I can remember writing, I was 8 years old, and it was a story about a dragon in the hills, and everyone was terribly afraid of this dragon. It was a girl dragon. Until one young brave boy went and met the dragon and found out that she wasn't so scary. But then the rest of the villagers came and they were still afraid, and they ended up trying to kill her. So it was quite a heavy story for an 8-year-old.
Story ends?
I think they killed the dragon. I know. I was a dark 8-year-old. My friend Sarah Lotz is a South African writer, and she is absolutely prolific. And she's written, I've written 5 books in my life. She's written 5 books this year. And she does a lot of collaborations with other people. I'd love to do something with her. But although she does very dark novels with other people, what I'd like to do with her is actually a kid's book. Because we used to work together in animation, and I think we'd make a great team. And I think we could do something really, really fun. Also, I'm really tired of killing people, so I'd like to do something where no one dies. I'm inspired by the world. I'm inspired by things that I run across every day. It might be a commercial, it might be a snippet of news, it might be something that somebody's tweeted. I'm just a giant feeding machine. I'm just stuffing it all into my brain, and sometimes it comes out in interesting ways. Look, I read a lot of comics when I was a kid, and a lot of kind of fantastic fiction, but also mythology, and allegories and parables, and I think all of that is a strong influence in my work. And I like to kind of try out things which don't work together necessarily. It's like food, you want to try kiwi fruit and salmon. It might be an interesting combination, and it's unexpected. Zoo City has been optioned as a film. It's being made by a producer called Helena Spring, who's been Oscar nominated for some of her other work. And I'm working very closely with the director to make a script, to write a script which really works and captures the spirit of the book, while adapting obviously to the visual medium. It's a bit hard to show an email scam in a movie. So it's very exciting, and we're working together very closely. I dream casting. I'd love to see a young South African actress in the part. I think the tendency is to default to American, but I think we have amazing talent in South Africa. have kind of stalked Idris Elba, who is Luther. And I went to his hotel. I arranged a meeting. I didn't actually stalk him, but I arranged a meeting when he was in South Africa filming Mandela. And I gave him a copy of the book, and he really loves it. So maybe if his schedule allows, he might play Benoit. If we can afford him, we'll see. But he would be a great Benoit, I think. I don't know. I guess maybe the word girls might make people think that it's a teenage book, but I think there are enough books recently, like Gone Girl, which are very much adult titles. So I don't really want teenagers reading it. I think it's very dark. Yeah. But I don't think that would be an easy mix-up. But I don't know the specifics of Polish YA and how the titles work here. That's a tough question. I think I'm going to look at kind of books which had a formative influence on me. And I think it's probably The Ballad of Halo Jones by Alan Moore, who's a comics writer. And it was something that I read in my early teenage years, and it had such a strong impression on me. And it was just this amazing adventure about this very inspiring young woman who was very single-minded. And she goes off into space and has these absolutely incredible and quite harrowing adventures. And what I love about Alan Moore is that he often wraps up social issues into his fiction, and uses these crazy adventures as a way of really exploring where we are right now and the stuff that we're dealing with right now. I had a lot of fun with my character Toby in Moxieland, who is just a complete awful jerk. I would punch him in the face if I ever met him in real life, but he was really fun to write. I think maybe it's because we can't get away with that in normal life. But for the most part, the characters I really like are troublesome young women. I like to, in Zoo City, I tried to wrap up in the noir tradition. You have the troubled detective, and he's probably an alcoholic, and he's smoking in his office. And the door bursts open, and in walks this troublesome dame, and she's beautiful and dangerous, and she's smoking. And I wanted to make those two characters one person, and that's what I tried to do in Zoo City, was to create someone who was the troubled detective, but also the troublesome dame, wrapped up into one person. And I think Kirby's the same. I think Kirby, in The Shining Girls, she has a lot of issues, but she's feisty and she has heart throughout all of that. And she's not going to let anything stop her. She's very single-minded, very determined, and she's not going to let this go. And I admire that, and I think she'd be quite a cool person to meet. I always know how my books start and how they end, and I'm always working towards that ending. But it's like taking a road trip at night. I think it was an E.L. Doctorow quote. You know where you're leaving from, you know where you're going to, and you know some of the major waypoints along the way. But the rest of the time you're driving in pitch black, you can see 20 feet ahead of you in the headlights, and you've just got to figure it out and try and stay on the road. So I like to leave a lot of space for the subconscious process to come through, and that's where the magic in writing happens. In that moment between your brain firing and your fingers on the keyboard, and something else happens, and the character does something that you hadn't expected that makes so much more sense, and that's amazing. I think I kind of write the ideas as soon as they come up. I do have 4 ideas for new novels, and I've got to decide which order to do them in. So I suppose some of them kind of live and breathe and inhabit the dark room in the back of my brain for a while. I kind of pace around until they're ready to come out. So yeah, I do think about the idea a lot. The actual writing usually takes me about a year and a half to write. But of course you're constantly working on it and finessing it and trying to make it better all the time. If I could have written any book, I think it would be William Gibson's Pattern Recognition, which is just such an amazing snapshot of our times and the strange liminal spaces of today, and how fast things change. It's a really amazing book which left a huge mark on me. I think a writer's greatest dream is just to be read. You want to reach an audience, you want people to engage with your book and for them to carry away some part of the story with them. I think it's maybe a bit like being a virus. You want to inhabit other minds.